Welcome to the TechForum Webcast recorded June 25th, 2020. Thank you for joining us. TechForum has been running conferences in New York City since 1995 for IT professionals who work in cybersecurity for mid to large organizations. The TechForum mission is to provide a platform for sharing our experiences, managing new and disruptive technologies that improve the competitive advantage of the businesses we work for. If you'd like to learn more about us, please visit us at www.techforum.com. In this webcast, our moderator will be Priscilla Tate, the founder and director of TechForum. We look forward to hearing any feedback and are happy you've joined us.
Hi, I'm Priscilla Tate, founder and director of TechForum. If you're new to TechForum, our mission is to provide a space to discuss business management strategies for implementing new and disruptive technologies. We deploy these technologies because they are driving the competitive advantages for the organizations we work for. Today, we want to shine a light on the enterprise risk management process and what our guest, Peter Lashenick, refers to as the technical debt in our cybersecurity controls, meaning those problems and flaws in our ecosystem we know about, but we have not fixed. Peter, you're Director of Cyber Problem Management at BNY Mellon. You have a great title, but I wonder if you could tell us what you really do.
Where my role comes into is looking at our cyber control, how they function, how they should function, and what do we expect the risk to look like on the business side is how are we managing it? Are we getting better or worse? Can I prove it? It's something we can turn around to show the business or an examiner or regulator.
Why don't you kind of bring us into the discussion by explaining why are we having this discussion right now?
One of the things I've run into, I've worked in a number of firms from most recently Credit Suisse, Goldman Sachs, and now Bank of New York Mellon, is when I look at the control stack, and I've worked at first line and second line of heading up those areas, it's saying, how do we know we're really doing what we think we're doing? How do we feel secure? We start off with asking in the industry, what are my controls? And everybody has controls about how they want to manage the entrance for access, how I want to know that my systems are running. But we didn't start with the same question. What am I protecting against? What am I worried about? Which is a business side question. So what I focused on is take what the business worries about, look at what we're doing, and do they match? Do we actually reduce the risk? Am I building a door to protect the house in the middle of a field, but there's no house? And where I do have things that I care about, am I doing it frequently? What we call continuous controls monitoring. That's relatively new, probably about 6-7 years ago it started. Comes out of an area called CoBit, which matches up with the NIST. NIST tells you what to do. CoBit tells you what are you worrying about, the risk. Because one without the other, you're not protecting the right thing.
Well, I think what you do is weave together very well a lot of the industry guidelines and also some practice methodologies. I mean, you're not inventing this from scratch, but you're making a unique blend to match the risk that's unique to your organization.
When I'm working at Bank of New York Mellon, what we do as a bank is very different than what Goldman Sachs did when I was there. We're about protecting what's in place already. Yeah, we grow it, but it isn't that we should be unbounded. So we have a different set of worries.
One of the things that struck me when we were doing this is that risk has many levels and ways to categorize and approach it. And one of the problems we have is how does cyber get covered?
When I look at cybersecurity risk, we break it down. We use similar to the NIST from the protect, detect, and identify and all the 5 domains is how are we protecting the environment. So there is a set in our controls catalog. We call it a technology control framework. Most banks do. It did originate from this. So we look at that, but you have 800, 900, 1,000. It's not uncommon to have 1,000 controls to go with these risks. But from all the controls, there's usually a key set of controls. And the trick is to really identify that based on the business needs, which boil down to about 30 to 50 things. What are we worried about most? If I think about access control, what am I worrying about? People getting access, people retaining access, removing it when they leave a transfer. We want to manage its life cycle. So I broke it down to 3 or 4 things. And then you could add in, well, how do I know the person's real? Identity. Do I know you, Priscilla, are really you? So you establish something. Usually you have your login. So now we have about 4 controls. Out of the 100 that you can bring into access management, just 4 or 5 I worry about. There's a couple more, but now that I pick my key control, a control could be, do you have a written policy statement? Well, sure, but that changes once a year. So I'm not monitoring to see people are changing the policy every moment. Do you have standards? Sure, we use this application. I don't have to check that we're using it every day because it's the only thing I gave. But I do have to make sure people aren't getting something that they're not authorized for. So I look at who has access every day. I want to see every single transaction. And I want to see, does it match in my tool where you request the access? And if all of a sudden I see people getting access, but they're not getting approved, I may have a systemic, or I might have a BAU type of problem. Maybe they're doing it wrong and they know a friend in tech support. Maybe they're using a new tool that I never authorized. Well, it's great, it's perfect, it's also unknown. And the unknown I can't measure right. I just see access without approval. So I know I have something wrong.
So your job is to be above a lot of the different divisions which you've already managed in your career, to incident response, patching, those kind of vulnerabilities, all of those things that have created problems that you know about at your company. There are so many logs and so many places where software comes from, data repositories. How do you know where to look? It's like a needle in the haystack. You've got everything and it's all measuring something different.
Well, and that's just it. Everything measures something different, but things that are measurable are quantifiable. If I can't measure it, I don't really understand it. So when somebody says, I want this control in place, which means a rule, that's all it means to me, I'm going to say, how do you enforce the control? Maybe a half a dozen questions we'll go through. How do you really know it works? What's your definition of passing and failing? Once you can figure all that out and where the data is kept, now I know how to measure it. And everything should be boilable to pass or fail.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't define pass or fail, then you really don't know what it is. Are you allowed in the house? Or are you not allowed in the house? Are you a guest in the house? Oh, well, that's temporary access is access. So we want to know all that. So there could be 500 different tools to do it, but in the end, there's going to be one result, either positive or negative.
One of the things that's always bothered me about this is that we had risk management procedures before we became mobile and iPhone and cloud and all of that. How can we, if we're doing our work differently, how can we use the same methodology of risk to measure the validity of our controls if they're happening in a different way? It's like they're hard-coded differently.
Well, you asked the right thing. Let me use an analogy. If I want to get from New York to Pennsylvania, you normally take a car or a plane or a train. The method is always going to change. But in the end, I was in New York and then I'm in Philadelphia. The time changes, but the actual action never changed. So today, I log in directly when I go into my office. I turn on my computer and I log in. Tomorrow, I go home, I turn on my computer, I'm going to log in. But you thought about, well, how do I connect to the office? I don't want everybody connected. Somebody says, we're going to use VPN software, or you are going to use a virtual desktop. So I'm logging in 2 different ways. But I'm still logging into the firm. I'm still establishing who I am. But somebody said, if you log in remotely with your laptop, how do I know your laptop isn't compromised? So I'll tell you what, I'm going to put software on your laptop to lock it down. One of the things I've been doing is I want to examine all these laptops remotely since we went from a small percentage of the firm to almost all the firm remote, and see, is everything there? We look at it daily. Are they all running right? Now, I don't have to physically look at every device. I'll have a dashboard that says, oh, these 15 devices aren't working right. Now we can make a decision. Should we isolate them? Since I don't know what they are, what's missing, maybe I don't want to let them in. You came into my restaurant, but you didn't have a shirt and shoes. Next, yeah, you had a tank top and flip-flops, but that wasn't good enough for me. Similar, not the same. We do the same with cyber control. You establish what the threshold is, And it shouldn't matter if I came in from any different exit point, but I came in the front door. I didn't sneak around the back.
So this sets me up to go back to your conception of technical debt. What do you mean when you
Yeah.
say technical debt?
So technical debt, a lot of firms do something called an RCSA, risk and control self-assessment. They look at their whole stack of risks they worry about, and once a year they measure, here's all my controls and here's how well I think they work. And when they find, well, this isn't an A+ perfect, I have something negative, that's technical debt. Things that need to be fixed. It could be across the environment we don't do it well, or it could be I just saw it twice, it wasn't done well. Problem with that, looking at that model of technical debt when you're examining it, it's once a year, so you have 364 days to take advantage of it. So will we switch to, when I said earlier, continuous controls monitoring? Let's look at it every day. RCSAs look at a random test. Examiners, auditors pick 25 samples out of 1 million and say, we'll look at those and we'll see how they look.
So they
What
just
I
do it at
prefer to
one point in
do
time? They just take
one point in time, it could be over the whole year, but it's 25 samples. But I'm
Okay.
only looking for the one time someone did it. So I measure 1 million examples. And I want to see every one of them when they were done wrong. Every time it's done wrong, I call that technical debt. It's on the micro level, transactional. You got into the software, but you never had written authorization to do it. But you got in somehow. I don't know how you did it, but I've set up a tolerance. You know what? I'm going to allow 0.5% of all events in the year, of 1 million. 50,000 could be wrong, and I feel pretty good that I'm 99% perfect. But I accepted 50,000 mistakes. That's technical debt. 50,000 times, something could have gone wrong. It adds up over time. It could be macro debt. It becomes, there's something systemically wrong. What I found is, of the 50,000, 30,000 of them from one office in Idaho, which only has 10 people. Why are they having all this problem? Because somebody figured it out, and they go through Idaho and they get in the back door, and they take advantage of it. The benefit of the continuous controls monitoring, they should have said, we're going to check everything. We're going to set up an SLA. You have 30 days to fix it. That's my tolerance. Day 31, I'll be intolerable. I'm going to put it to your CIO. Why aren't you doing this? Explain yourself. You could have risk accepted it and said, well, I knew about it. I just said it wasn't that bad. Risk accepting doesn't make the risk goes away. It means I chose not to do anything.
Right.
But it's still sitting there. And that's what I always mean by technical debt. Things that are unfixed. It's that slow leak in your tire. After a while, you're going to run out of air. You can keep putting air in, but then you took a 1,000-mile road trip. You didn't have time to put in air. And now you're in the middle of nowhere and you went flat.
I was struck by your use of the term technical debt because I've heard it used in context of the SecDevOps and the Agile programming framework. Is that something that you're lifting it from, or did they take it from risk?
It's a risk concept that's always been there. You have technical debt. You can do it from, you have technology incidents, you have cybersecurity incidents, also called security incidents. You have operational incidents, and you have control incidents. They're all similar. Each one has their own technical debt. When I say it's a technical incident, my server crashed. Don't worry about it. I have another server that backs it up. But my debt is, until I bring it back up, I've lost some resilience. Maybe I don't have another backup. I got to go fix it. I have to swap out a hard drive. I have to do something to make it work again. There is no control risk because the machine is still functioning. The software it uses, if it was protecting my environment, is still working. Operational risk, I didn't lose any money. And it always equates to, for operational side, did I lose or gain money? Gaining money by accident is the bad thing. Losing money is a terrible thing. You know, both are bad. Security, did anybody steal my information? You can be all things at once. I lost my firewall, it crashed. My company's wide open. People can export data that's going into my payment systems. They're stealing money. I've also lost control. I don't know who's doing what. So you can be all four at once. And each one of them can be measured independently and have different levels of risk. but it's always that technical debt. And like I said, the concept, we work a bit like Agile because you're always developing the next thing. In the world of cyber, it's fast. You can't build to protect from yesterday. You build to protect from tomorrow. And hopefully tomorrow they don't use yesterday's, malware or intrusion method. So you have to protect everything.
Yeah, it's like that statement about technology that we're using yesterday's tools to solve tomorrow's problems. That's what reality is. Reality is. But so I'm getting a picture of where you sit and what you're doing. You're reporting right to the deputy CISO, and you've used all your expertise with standards and industry guidelines to inform your controls. You use your knowledge of the bank and how it works, and your history of what your business is to find out what's at stake, what the risk register is, with the help of business. Is your job? Would you say your job? It sounds like to me that that knowledge base is great, but you're doing project management, right?
Yes, I would. Many years ago, I went through project management training as well. I have a wide background. The principles you learn in project management are very similar to the principles of ITIL, which was giving us the idea of service desk, about how you manage things in a concrete form. Basically, I have something, I need you to do something to resolve it. You're going to come back and give me a commitment. You're going to tell me what you're doing. When are you doing it? How will I know it's finished? Well, the same way I measure the retirement of that technical debt, the fixing of it, what we call problem management, is no different than problem management for technology, no different than project management. How do I know your task is done? How do I know you've delivered? How do I know there's a flag that I can stick in the ground and move on to the next thing? Because that's solved. It gave us a nice, and I hate to use the word, personally, I love it. Everybody hates it. This is a strong bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is what I always say, it stops everything from happening at once. And I noticed in talking before, you brought up Max Weber. Now, I personally studied public administration, is where my degree is. I got into technology because there were no positions when I wanted to do when I graduated back in the late 80s. His principles about how a bureaucracy functions and should function, they steer what I do every day. The idea of a bureaucracy is it ensures that we're taking an intelligent approach, but if you can come up with a better one, and this is where you brought in Agile, let's adapt. Don't be a technocracy. Rules for rules' sake don't make a lot of sense. Rules that prevent us from doing something foolish make sense. And I know I once told you about this story. If you go back to the mid-40s, U.S. had developed the atomic bomb, and we were working on more development. And everybody was worrying about securing the plant, make sure nothing gets out. Unfortunately, our adversaries at that time wanted to know how you do it. So how do you get the plans out of a secure building? Is they infiltrated into our organization. A woman posed as a secretary. Every day she would copy down plans, and she put them in the bottom of a Kleenex box. And she intentionally got herself sick and a very bad head cold. And when she's leaving one day, because all bags were examined before you leave, people were looking up and down, make sure you're not hiding anything. She purposely was carrying a lot of stuff, and she starts a coughing and sneezing fit before she gets to security, drops all of her stuff. She hands the Kleenex box to the security guard who's checking everything, picks up all her stuff while she's blowing her nose, and starts walking away. Security guard very diligently points out, "Excuse me, miss, you forgot your Kleenex box." She handed her the Kleenex box, the plans, which are in the bottom of the box, walk out the front door. So the idea of security here was a fallacy. They really didn't secure it because they didn't feel comfortable, because who would ever use a code to hide something? And that's how you have to kind of look at it. The bureaucracy would have said, check everything, regardless of condition. And he forgot the first rule. It would have prevented one more exfiltration of a very sensitive document.
Going back to bureaucracy and Max Weber, he was like a sociologist, right at the same time as the Industrial Revolution was happening. And he didn't like social classes, and he felt the working class was, there were people, he didn't like people getting jobs just because they were friends with so and so. He wanted people to get jobs because they had skills. So he wrote down his little list of what things should be and called it, this is a bureaucracy, how a bureaucracy should work. It was like a floor plan for collaboration. How do you collaborate and not play favorites and do things sensibly and, you know, not step on anybody's toes? And I think it's so interesting how we've looked at it as today, we've forgotten that the origin was really a plan to make managing large organizations possible.
Exactly. What helps an army move, what helps a city run, is the same thing that can help a bank or other institution manage itself correctly. Define what are your rules? What do you want to have happen? How will you know it's doing right? And measure it. But when a rule exists for itself, when a person gets a position because they know somebody else and I'm entrenched and you can't remove me, it becomes difficult to manage it because there is no response, there is no recourse to fix it. The rules have to adapt when we come up with controls. And I always come back to the controls. And what he speaks about bureaucracy is all about controls. We want to manage our environment. When I was at one bank, in the parking garage, the guy said, you know, it was too hard for us to get these card readers to work. So they went to a local Best Buy, picked up a Wi-Fi extender, connected it to the network so they can have good connections for their equipment down in the bottom of the garage. Thing is, nobody knew about it. Nobody had authorized this. And now it looks like you have intrusions going on through the garage where people are trying to sneak into our network. And they had the right passwords to get in. But what should have happened, and it did, as soon as it connected, the network says, I don't know what that device is. I'm going to isolate it and turn it off. I'm going to wait 5 minutes. Let's see if it does it again. It did it 3 times. Then a trouble ticket would go up on a dashboard to somebody, which is not just a monthly or a piece of paper dashboard. It said, you need to go look at this area and see what's going on. So somebody gets dispatched to go find that device, physically remove it, and find out why they were doing it. They did it for all best purposes. Unfortunately, they did it against the rules. And it looks just like somebody trying to be malicious.
What are some of the concrete things? What do you have in your toolkit for making sure that your controls, cyber controls, are healthy and running every day?
I started with what I said before earlier. You must define the rules of how something works. What are those standards that you've written into measurable quantities? We have to get a measuring into place, which usually requires I get a data warehouse, things like Splunk or others, that the data from all the different systems, all the access control changes I'm doing, monitoring of devices would flow into one place. So I have the data in one place. I put on top of it a dashboard to read it. You can use Tableau, Business Object, QuickView, Homegrow, something. There's always more things that I could read the data in near time, if not real time. Not just once a month. I produced a report from last month's data that it's always running so I can see where the debt is. So I can see where things aren't what I expect it to be. And when I measure activity, number of events, amount of time to do something, I also built in what's the threshold? At what point does it go from green to amber to red? How do I know that I should worry more about this? That will take care of the BAU activity, the day-to-day thing. And then we start looking for those needle in a haystack. So I take the data itself because it's all in one place. You bring in somebody, you would call them a data scientist, analytics, something along that level, where they can read through the data further, play a what if. Sometimes you call it a Monte Carlo on trading side. I want to play with it and start noticing things that are happening. Are they happening in clusters? Do they run counter to what I would expect? 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., I expect people to log in. But am I seeing everybody logging in at 10 a.m.? Is it all the time? What else happened that day? Oh, there was a town hall till 10 a.m. So the logins weren't bad, they were expected. There was change activity expected on a weekend. Oh, people are doing work. I expect that. But when they happen opposite, nobody should be here. It's Mother's Day. We closed the shop. But I see all this activity going on from all over the place. And I noticed Priscilla just logged in from London, from Cairo, from Delhi, Bangkok, and New York within 5 minutes. Well, that's interesting. How is she flying around the world so fast? It's telling me something may be happening bad, or maybe she's leaping from machine to machine, but it's not the normal way I would expect it. So at that point, call Priscilla, call her boss, see what's going on. Maybe she'll stop what she was doing and be a little nervous. Maybe she'll say, no, we were doing all these system checkouts. Now I know about normal behavior. But kind of keep an eye on that at the same time. We want to see if it keeps happening. Is it unexpected? And that's where the data scientists come in. You have to look for the thing you don't look for. If you get too comfortable with the numbers always show me in the green, you probably have to raise the bar a little bit.
Whitelisting. Is this a viable strategy in this setting? Would you recommend it as something that you would put into finding out if your controls are working?
It gets a little dangerous. I've seen this in another bank where a senior manager told the staff, just in case something bad would have happened, everybody give me your passwords, your accounts. And she worked in this area that had access to the SWIFT transfers. And SWIFT is what lets us move money. It all sounded great. In a short period of time, $95 million was moved to an offshore account in the Caymans, and she had a very nice holiday and never came back. It's not a solution.
Since we're talking about best practices and we want to get down to the nitty gritty, we had a couple of good questions that came from members. The first question's got two parts. How do you balance controls, compliance, and staff resources? Second part, do you risk rate controls, similar to how many people risk rate vulnerabilities?
Well, the answer very short is yes and yes. First off,
okay,
you have to decide what's your tolerance level. It always goes back to tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
How many times can I have operational incidents? How much money can I lose a year? Now, every bank puts some number. It could be 1% growth. Walmart allows for 3% of its inventory to be stolen every year. They've worked that in. They expect there is going to be a certain amount of shoplifting. They're not going to set up that they're going to shake down every client who leaves the store to see if they've hidden something on their person. It has a negative ramification. You may find the one person who stole, but I guarantee 1,000 will never come back. Now, at the other side, you rate your controls, how effective they are and how important they are. Every control is not a key control. Remember earlier I said you could have 800, 900, 1,000 controls, but 30 or 50 that were the key ones. Monitor and rate your key controls, and how are they met? What does your risk look like at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter? Is it getting better or worse? You set an appetite. I can afford to lose $1 million. In the end, it all equals money. I can have 1,000 outages. I can have 500 people without unapproved access. At the end of the quarter, at the end of the period, how do I look? Do I have more or less? And you should be looking at that every day, because if 500 happens on the first day of the month, I'm still under my tolerance. What happens on the second day of the month? One more mistake and I go over. You didn't get ready for it. So you can measure it. Always goes back, you want to monitor. Same as just like vulnerabilities. You want to test. Did you patch? Did you make sure that a machine that went offline for 3 months because we weren't really watching it, all of a sudden it comes back online 3 months later with vulnerabilities I patched for when I thought I was at 100%, I'm not. When you say whitelisting, I'm thinking I go to a blacklist, I block that host until it can be patched. But maybe it's a critical host. I can accept it, but I'm running a higher risk now. I've already said I won't tolerate this. I'm 3 months past when I would tolerate it, and now I'm going to allow it in, because what could go wrong?
This leads right into the second question that we got from one of the members. As the environments become more complex, is the risk practice taking advantage of automation?
It's a matter of scale. You know, it's okay that I can individually open up an incident ticket every time something's wrong, and I call those a control incident or the control break. But quickly, remember I said earlier, you could have 1 million access events, and 50,000 of them are wrong. If it took you 1 minute to open it and 1 minute to close it, that's 100,000 minutes of work. That's a lot of people doing not a lot of productivity. This is where automation comes in. Just like you would automate everything else, if I can identify it, then I can record it automatically. I set up the rules of how do you record these things. And they'll go to somebody. Maybe they self-heal. Maybe I say, well, I see access without approval. Easy, remove the access. They can request it again.
So
And
you
this time,
are
they can do it
actively,
right.
you are using automation in the risk process.
Yes,
Is it,
yes. You start
and
off
you think,
maybe manually
yeah,
to test it, but you quickly have to go, okay, we need to automate this because it's a matter of scale.
right.
And there's always going to be more controls I want to do. I don't want to hire more staff. I want to hire more systems.
Who sets this up? Whose job is it to determine what goes in the service level?
So it's a good point. And there are two levels. There's the service level and there's the objective level agreement. So I'm going to have an SLA and an OLA. The SLA goes back to that risk tolerance. How much am I willing to do without? People may call it an RTO for the infrastructure, recovery time objective. How long before I want the machines back up, the application back on? Well, the same way is how long do I want a control unresolved? How is that set? It's set and implemented between your infrastructure teams and your CTO organization and your CISO organization who sets the rule, or it could be your risk organization. Each one will have different areas who run the controls and oversee them, but they have to come to an agreement, which is only in the end by the business. How long are they willing to accept unmanaged risk? All that debt piling up. I'll allow you have unauthorized access for 1 day, but if I see you don't have your approval within 1 day, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to allow it for no days. If you try to log on and I can't see you had access approved, I'm going to remove it. If I see a server that's unpatched on my vulnerability side, I'm going to isolate it. Well, you can always turn it off. Problem is, everything is now off because of a minor patch. So you risk rate the vulnerability, you risk rate the controls that are not working exactly the way I want it to, and that's where you help set the SLA. It's where do you feel the most comfortable?
So you're the guy in the middle to get them to fix it, to get them to not do it. What is your secret? Or do you have, I know that it's very difficult to get business to sit down and talk about risk ratings and things like that. What's your secret?
It's about relationships.
Okay.
We don't do things in a vacuum. I don't sit down, write up a controls catalog and say, here are the things you should do. Is you have to go back to the people who run it. I'm going through it right now. Is what will we agree to? What will we tolerate on one side? What can I support on the other? If I want it perfect, but I need an army of 1,000 people to do it, and I have a budget for 3, well, then that's what I'm going to get. And it may take them a year to fix things. Well, that's going to be unacceptable. And that's where it needs to go back to the business owners. You want security, then it does come at a price. I can give you something that makes you feel good, but it's not really secure. And we've seen countless organizations that feel secure until they're not, until they pay a ransom, until their systems go out, or they can just keep pushing through. But normally the SLAs, it's an agreement. Just like I'm going to buy your house, you're going to give me so long to come up with the money, and I'm going to give you so long to vacate. And you're going to give me so long to sign the deal and take over the house. And the objective level agreement, all my house sales, how fast are they supposed to occur? What's my overall appetite? If I don't sell 1,000 tractors a month, then I can't keep running this business. No matter how well I sell it, I'm only selling 500 a month, I'm losing money. You can keep losing it up to so long, and then it takes care of itself.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed speaking with you, and your expertise has been wonderful. I now want to just kind of put it back to where you are in the organization. And this is a final question. The topic was getting to residual risk and getting that out of our cyber programs. You work for a company that has a maturing strategy for addressing cyber risk. How do you anticipate that the cyber risk landscape may change, and how will it impact your technical debt strategy?
Well, it's a great question. I think everybody who listens to this, everybody who doesn't listen to this, all faced the same challenges 3 months ago. We're going to take a normal way of doing business, what we expect to happen, and we're going to upend it, and we're going to twist it around and make it something different. 4 months ago, my firm ran about 2 to 5% of its people remote. Now we run 98% remote. We weren't thinking about that. It changed the way we look at cyber. So fast that, well, we ran out of computers. How are we going to make it do? Everybody had the same challenge. How can I make it work and make it sustainable? And I've gone through that back in after 9/11. What happens when you can't enter a city for a week? What happened after the blackout in 2003, where I have no power in the Northeast for extended periods of time after Hurricane Sandy and Irene? What happens after each one of these? Each one presents a unique situation. It's always going to change. The thing is, we know what we want to protect, and as we introduce more, it's always that risk weighting. What can I tolerate? But are my controls initially designed with business resiliency in mind? I don't care if you log in remotely or in the office, you have to use a company laptop. And I remember working for an insurance firm over 20 years ago where I brought my own laptop in. I could plug it into the network and start working because I knew what I was doing. I was in charge of desktop support. No firm would allow me to do that anymore, at least a large bank. And this was a much larger firm than I work at now. It never occurred to them. What could go wrong if the guy we put in charge of something brought his own equipment into the bank? You have to just say, no, I'm going to blacklist anything I don't know what it is. So it's always going to evolve, which also means you have to rewrite your controls. The RCSAs we do quarterly, semi-annually, annually, they're also looking at, are we missing something? Do we need to add in more controls? Do we need to evolve our control to something that we haven't thought about yet?
Well, Peter, this has really been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being with us. We've been speaking with Peter Lashenick, the Director of Cyber Problem Management at BNY Mellon. Today, we also want to thank the many members who responded to our informal survey and contributed questions for the discussion. And most of all, thanks to all of you for listening, and we hope to see you soon at our next TechForum Webchat.
I look forward to seeing you too. Thank you.